Hi you guys, this is Alex with Kaleidoscope Creations, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make one of these mushroom wraps. So I have an Atlantasite picked out for today, and these are the pliers that I'll be using. I am awful with remembering the names of all the different pliers, but I do have a variety here, and I use all of these throughout the process. I plan on doing a more in-depth video specifically on like the tools I use, the wire and all of that. So I already have the wires pre-cut here. I do also use different wires from different companies, but today I'm using 21 square gauge wire by Parawire, and it's the fine silver plated wire. And then I also have some 24 gauge weaving wire that I'll be using. And I also have some 21 gauge half round wire from Parawire as well. So first, what I do is I cut 3 of the 21 gauge square wires, and I wanted one, I'm lining them up on one side here, and I wanted one to be about an inch longer than the other two. I just kind of eyeball it. Any scraps that I end up cutting off of previous wraps I end up saving for future wraps, and I can use them in certain parts. And then I also just cut a good length of the 21 gauge wire. I kind of eyeball it. This is probably about 1.5 feet long, or you can start out cutting small pieces and using those at a time. So first I take the longest of the 3 square wires, and I take these pliers. Also, I'm sorry if you guys hear the chickens and the rooster in the background. So I pinch right here, and then I just fold both sides up, and that's going to create the base of the mushroom. So I'll show you, that's creating that shape right there. And then I take these pliers and I move up just a little bit, about right there, and I'm going to fold this side down, and then I do it on the other side, and I try to get it as close as possible, but you can always go back and redo it. So I fold both sides down. Then once I've got this shape, I take this pair of pliers, which a great plier brand is the Giron brand, and I kind of just straighten it out a little bit. Make sure it's straight from both sides. And so I kind of want this to be, I'll straighten my wire, but I kind of want this to be a little bit narrower here. So I kind of push those in just a little. And this one needs to come down just a little bit more. Okay, so then you have this shape, and as I weave, usually, because I'm pulling them so tight, it does kind of distort the shape just a little bit. You can weave a little bit looser and then it won't pull it as much, but I kind of run with it because I kind of like the natural little bend that it does on its own as I'm doing it. So I did not pre-cut my weaving wire, so let me get that cut really quick. So for the weaving wire, I kind of just roll it out, and I take this hand and I go out as far as I can stretch. So probably about 2 feet. And like I said, anytime I cut extra wire, some people measure exactly, and I'm just not very good at that because then I'm always worried I'm gonna run out of wire. But any extra wire that I have, I save it and I use all my scraps for other projects. So nothing is going to waste unless it's like little tiny pieces that I cut off. So what I start doing is I grab the bottom of the base and I kind of put maybe about 2 or so inches right there, and then I pinch the wire right here, and then I start wrapping this around the base, and you kind of want them to be as close as possible, but sometimes there's a little bit of space and I take my pliers and I'll kind of pinch them together. You just want to be careful so you don't damage the wire. I originally had another style of doing my mushroom wraps, and I just feel like this is a little bit more secure. It holds the stone in a little bit better. So it's definitely my favorite way of doing it. I just started doing it recently, but it's already become my favorite way of doing it. But maybe eventually I can do a tutorial for my older style. So once I get to the corner here, I go ahead and cut the wire, and I gently tuck it around so that it's not sticking out and it's not going to scratch or poke anybody. And I get it to where it's laying down flat. Then I'll go ahead and take my pliers and kind of gently pinch all of these together so there's not a gap. Now I flip back over to this side and I wrap the rest of the way around, which I'm still new to making tutorials. This is, I think, only my second one technically, but I'm sorry if I bump the camera or anything. I've kind of been procrastinating on doing tutorials, and I figured today was a good day to start, so I guess it's one of those things you kind of learn more as you go. Yeah, I just wrap all the way around the bottom to the next corner. I'll probably do it one more time. And sometimes when you're doing this, the shape of the base, like the stem of the mushroom, kind of gets out of track, so I go ahead and reshape it a little bit. Make sure all of your weaves are pinched together so that there's no gaps. Alright, so now with this weaving wire down here, I try to also keep these as straight as possible. So now with the weaving wire down here, I wrap it around, and I make sure that it's not like right up against the ones that we just did here. I kind of want a little bit of a space. So I bring it through in between these two and under the other side, and then I kind of push this wire to where it's laying. Let me see if I can get it to focus a little bit better. But I kind of bring it close down, and then I'm going to wrap around this other side over here. And bring it back around this side one time. And then bring it over. And I'm going to take it under the other side over here. And I try to make sure that I pull it tight. You can do it a little bit looser, or you can even use a thinner gauge. Sometimes it also helps if you take your pliers to kind of pinch it to where it's tight around the wire, and sometimes they'll get a little bent, and I kind of take the pliers just to straighten them up. And then you're going to do the same thing on this side, as close as you can to that bottom where you started. Wrap it around one full time on this side, and then I kind of hold here, I pinch here, and then I pull the wire tight, and then you're going to wrap around one more time and go under. Instead of going all the way around this a second time, you're just going to go over it and then under the other side. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like. I'm hoping that this focuses. And there will probably be some small gaps in between each of your weaves at first, but here in a few minutes, once I get a couple more weaves done, I will show you what I do. I kind of pinch them together with the pliers, but you're going to keep doing that same pattern where you go all the way around once and then back over and under the other side. So over, or all the way around one side once, and then back over the top and under the other side. And once I get about halfway, which I'll do about one or two more probably, and then I'll show you what I do, I will usually kind of pinch them down towards the bottom a little bit to close in any gaps in between the weaves, and then I actually bend the main wires outward a little bit to kind of hold them there. And then I kind of like it because it creates that mushroom base shape. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show you that part. So basically what I do is I take my pliers, and on this side I put the bottom of my plier down here on the bottom of the wrap, and then I just gently kind of ease the wires down, and I try to kind of hold them with my left hand, and then I come up here and I grab this wire and I kind of just twist it. I'll even kind of push the weave down with my pliers as I'm pulling this wire outwards, and that way it kind of holds them in place. Then I flip to the other side. So right now it's kind of this funky shape and it's not really even. So then I go ahead and I do the same thing on this side. I push them down and I kind of hold them in place, and then I grab the main wire and pull outward. So now you've got this shape, and typically what I'll do is sometimes these might be a little bit uneven now up at the top because you kind of want them going flat across, but like this one's a little bit higher. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and finish the weave, or I'll get pretty close to the end, and then I'll go ahead and readjust those if I need to. So over or around all the way, and then back over the top and underneath the other side. Wrap all the way once, back over the top, and under the other side. And you just keep doing that, and it might still have like some gaps in between the weave, but you can fix that after a couple of the weaves. You can, and the weaves definitely, if you're new to doing weaves, it definitely takes practice. So don't give up, just keep trying. I've been doing weaves for years now, and I still feel like sometimes they're not totally perfect, but that's the cool thing about art. Another thing too is if you are still fairly new to wire wrapping or doing certain parts of wire wrapping, your hands can definitely get more tired in the beginning, but eventually you do get a little bit more used to it. One thing I don't do much of anymore is coils, and I remember that was always one thing that really got my hands good. So once I get closer to the top, I kind of go back through with my pliers and just pinch the weave down a little bit just to make sure that it's nice and tight. And then I can do a couple more, but what I'm going to go ahead and do is I want to bring this side down just a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of pinch right here to try and straighten this wire a little bit more and make a sharper angle. There we go. Now they're a little bit more even. And then I think I'll probably only be able to fit one, maybe two more weaves. And hopefully my camera is focusing good enough to where you guys can see. So there's the little mushroom base. I do have a cover on my cameras also, like a little lens cap, and I'm hoping that that's not what's causing the blurriness. Alright, so then at the end, I wrap all the way around once to end it, and then on the back side, I cut it kind of close, and then I take my pliers. Let me go ahead and move that out of the way because we're done with the weaving wire now. I take my pliers and I tuck it in so that it's not going to scratch anybody. And then there's our little mushroom base. Okay, so for the next part, I take the other two long square wires and I basically kind of line it up to where there's one on each side of the mushroom base, so that whenever you line them up, it kind of looks like this. There's one on each side of the center wire, and I line them all up to where they're all the same length on my left side usually. I also make sure, which I actually did not do it, yes I did, okay. I make sure that where you end the wires, the weaving wire, I put those on the back side. So they're on this side, so you won't see them. So now what I do is I take my half round wire and I take the flat side of the half round and I kind of just come a little bit further out from the mushroom base. And I start wrapping with the flat side against the 3 square wires. And you just want to make sure that you kind of keep them lined up to where there is a square wire, then your mushroom base wire, and then another square wire behind it. And I start wrapping around, and sometimes I'll just kind of do a couple times and then hold it up to the stone to see if I need to remove any or add any more. And once it starts to get really short, it gets a little bit harder to do it with your fingers. So then I take my pliers and do it. And I'm actually going to trim this off. I tried to prevent my wires from popping all over the place as much as possible, but so once I've got a couple, I go ahead and push it with my nail up against the base there to where it's right up against. And so then what I do now, just to see if that's too long or not enough, I hold the stone up to it and I just kind of eyeball it. So I want at least a little bit of room on the end down here where there's no half round wire covering. So I think I'm actually going to take maybe 1 or 2 off. So before I cut my wire, I just go ahead and unwrap, and I think I'll probably just do 1. And then I trim that, and then I go back and I want to tighten all of these down. So I just kind of clamp them against the square wires and then pinch them together to make sure that they're close to the base. Okay, so now let me hold this up. Okay, I think that'll work perfect. I kind of want like a good little gap right here on the corner. So then what I do is I count how many I have on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I will do the same number on the other side. And you always want to make sure you have the flat side against the square wires. And then I'll count how many I do as I'm doing them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then I just cut that and clamp it down, and then I'll go ahead and use my nail to scoot it all the way up against the base, and then I clamp it tight, and then I'll cut the end of this off because that's already the 6 that we needed. And you just want to make sure you always push your ends down so that nothing pokes anybody. And then you want to go ahead and find the front of your wrap. I usually have like the longer, you can make it to where both sides, the wires are the same length. Usually I make it to where the left side has a little bit more length just because I typically work with the left side a little bit more. So now whenever you hold your stone up to the wrap, that's what it looks like. So what I do now is I flip it over, and the 3 wires on each side, I grab the one on the right and I pull it down, and then I grab the one on the left and I pull it down just where they're kind of sticking straight out, and then I flip it to the other side and I do the same thing, the left and the right ones. So basically what we're doing is we're making, I call it a cage. We're basically making a cage for the stone. So after doing this, I usually will go back and just make sure that these wires are still tucked down, because sometimes they'll lift up a little bit, the half round wires. And then you want to find the front of your wrap and make sure that it's facing you. So then what I do is I put my stone flat up against the half round wires that we wrapped around, and I will usually I kind of press this in between my lower thumb and my middle finger, and then I put the stone here and I center it up, and then I kind of grab it with my thumb and my back finger and hold it there. Then I grab the 4 wires, the 2 in the front and the 2 in the back, and I do this. I pull them together to try and kind of create the shape that we need. And then I'll kind of center the stone, make sure that it looks okay. And sometimes there is a little bit of a gap right here underneath the stone. Usually when you go to tighten all the wires together at the top, a lot of times it'll kind of close that gap there. That also takes a little bit of practice, and sometimes depending on the stone, I have a little bit of trouble getting it to close completely, but okay. And then once you've got it centered and it looks good and you're happy with it, I take the 2 side wires and I kind of push them around the edges. You want to be careful though, because if you push one side before the other side, it could off-center the stone. So that takes a little bit of practice. And then I pinch all of these 4 wires down with my index finger and my thumb and hold it in place while I move these 2 wires to fit around the outside shape of the stone, like that. And then I kind of bring them together at the top. And sometimes you kind of have to work with it just a little bit to get the wire to fit how you want it around the stone. And then I switch over and hold it with my left hand. And see, there's that little gap. Sometimes you can also take your pliers and kind of push the half round sections in. So typically a lot of times this will close up this little gap right here when you go to tighten up here. Not always, but sometimes it does. Sometimes you got to work with it, but I try my hardest not to ever damage the wire. So I take my pliers and I push these down here to kind of hold them in place. Then I come from the sides and I pinch the side wires together to kind of tighten them. And sometimes you have to play with it a little bit. And so it's closed that gap just a little bit. And now you're starting to see the little mushroom. So now what I do, once I've got the wires all brought together here to kind of create the cage for it, I make sure that they're all nice and tight. And then sometimes this might take just a few minutes of playing around with, make sure that they're all good to go. then this is one, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but this was a scrap wire that I cut off of another wrap that I was doing, and so I'm going to reuse it here. So it doesn't need to be very long, maybe 4 or 5 inches long, and I usually have a little bit excess on there. So I take it and I put it underneath my thumb right here, and I hold it together with these wires. And then I start wrapping tightly around all of these wires to hold them together. And I don't really have a set amount. I just kind of do however many. Usually it's probably about 8 to 10 wraps around. And then I kind of pinch it to where it's laying flat on those wires. And then I'll do it maybe one more time. Make sure that's laying flat, and then I flip over, and you want this wire sticking out here, but I cut majority of that away. And then you're going to take your pliers and you're going to tuck this wire up underneath your back wire, and I trim a little bit more off because I don't want it sticking out. And then you want to tuck it here so that it doesn't scratch anybody. I wrap it all the way around. Now it's starting to come together, so I usually go ahead and straighten these wires up a little bit, push that one down so that it's straight with these, and I wrap around a couple more times. I usually just do it to where it's got a decent little amount here, and then I bring it around to the back and I snip off the rest of this. And then I tuck that. And there you go. And now we can start our bail. So another thing too, if you still have a little bit of gaps around your stone, one thing that I do whenever I'm making my bail, it also kind of helps to tighten it up. So here with all these wires, I try to find the front two, and I separate them and I pull them forward. And those are going to be the two that you use for your bail. Then these, I grab the two on the right and I kind of just pull them down a little bit, and then I take my pliers, and the two on the left, I kind of try to get my pliers all the way at the very bottom, and I pinch, and then I bend down with not a whole lot of force, but kind of tight to where it'll pull these wires tighter down here. And then I do the same on this side. And so it kind of tightens all of this down here. I also will usually go back and kind of pull these wires to the side a little bit just so you can see more of the stone. My main goal is to never really cover too much of the stone. I want it to be the main focus. Okay, so then now what you can do is go ahead and straighten these two wires back out, and we're going to do the bail. And I usually will go ahead and kind of flatten this one back down, the wire here that we wrapped around. Whenever we cut it back here and tucked it, whenever you bend these down, it kind of comes out sometimes, so I just make sure I tuck it back down. So now the rest of the half round wire that I had cut earlier that we used for the base here, right here, we're going to use the rest of this, which you might have a little bit left over afterwards depending on how much you cut off. But usually what I do is I kind of line it up to where there's a good little length down here, and I pinch it with my thumb, and then I start wrapping with the flat side flat against the 2 square wires for the bail, and I start wrapping around. And you just want to kind of do it kind of tight together, but you can always go back later and scoot it down if you need to. Like I'll probably scoot this down just a little bit. And so then you just want to keep wrapping until, I usually eyeball it, but usually until there's about 20 to 25 wraparounds. So I usually get quite a few done, and then I'll stop and I'll look at it and see how long it is and see if that looks good. So usually I'll stop about right here, and I think I'm gonna add a couple more. Yeah, so maybe until it's about an inch, inch and a half. So I'll probably go ahead and end it here. And then I cut it to where the wire ends behind, and I flatten that down against the 2 square wires, and then kind of push them down a little bit, and then I go all the way down, kind of crimping those against the square wires. And sometimes it'll get a little bent, but just straighten that up. Okay, and there is the start of your bail. So then I take this leftover wire down here and I wrap it around, and I kind of just make it look nice and neat going down. Sorry, I have to go off camera because the wires sticking out keep hitting my phone. But I just keep twisting around. And just kind of watching where the wire is laying and making sure that it looks nice and neat. Okay, and then once you get to the bottom, you're going to have a little bit left. So I take my pliers and I wrap it around this back wire, and I pull it through real tight. And sometimes I'll usually, oh, that end just broke off. So then I'll wrap it around nice and tight. And you just want to make sure that there's no wires sticking out. You just want to make sure that it's nice and tucked. Okay, so now we're going to grab these and this pair. So now what I do is I grab right here at the base of the bail and I pull it forward where it's sticking straight out. Then this is usually the size that I use for my bails for my necklaces, is this one right here. Usually I'll use the smaller ones if I'm making like earrings. I don't really hardly ever use the larger one. This is usually my go-to size right here. So I go ahead and kind of put it right at the base of that, and then I bend this wire in and I push it flat up against the back. Then I flip it over and I grab these pliers and I pull these two wires out, and then I straighten them all the way to the sides. And then I kind of grab this right here at the base of the bail and kind of bend it inward to where it creates more of a circle, a more rounded shape for my bail. And then I grab the wire from the bail over here on currently the right side, if you're looking at the back, and I take it and I start twisting all the way around, but you want to make sure that it looks nice and neat. And I wrap it all the way down, which most of this gets covered anyways, but I just make sure that before I tie it off at the end that I like how it looks. So then you bring it around to the back and I cut majority of this off. I leave just a little bit, and then I tuck this wire underneath. And then you snip it off and tuck to make sure that there's no wires gonna poke anybody. And then I come back to the front and I kind of push the 4 wires that are sticking out of the side up a little bit out of the way. And this top wire right here from the bail that we just wrapped around, I kind of make sure that that's pulled down just a little bit and tuck it in. And then I grab this one from the other side of the bail wire and I bring it around on top of that other one. And sometimes it might be up a little bit too high, so you might have to use your pliers to kind of squeeze it in there. And then I bring it all the way around to the back and I wrap it underneath here. And then I snip most of that off. You just need a little bit. And then I tuck this wire in. And wrap it around the back of my bail. And I bring it up on the side and I clip almost all of that off. And then I tuck it down to where it's not going to scratch anybody. Alright, and then sometimes your bail might be lean into the side a little bit, so you just got to fix that how you want it. And there's that so far. And then you can pretty much do whatever you want with these. I'll show you what I've been doing lately with mine. So I take these two wires on this side and I kind of fold them up and over the bail a little bit, and then I create a swirl here with both of them. You can kind of do it however you want to. You can make it look like there's swirls on the mushroom, or try and make it look like there's some circles on the mushroom. Sometimes I like switching it up a little bit and doing something different, but this has kind of been my go-to design lately, and I'm really liking it a lot. So just kind of spiral that down, and then I do another little spiral right below it, going the opposite direction. And then I bring my wires up, and before I tie it off, I go ahead and kind of make sure that these spirals are where I want them and that they look okay. So that's what it's gonna look like. And then I just bring these around to the back. And I cut it off to where there's just a little bit here. And so all these pieces that I'm cutting off right now, I save and I use them for future wraps so that nothing goes to waste. And then I take these and I tuck them. And if you want to like kind of balance it out, you can also tuck them up underneath this wire over here. It's personal preference. And then I just tuck those there, and then these two I'm going to bring up here and just kind of tuck them around my bail to get rid of them, because I don't want to use them for anything. So I just kind of tuck them there, and then just push them in around the bail so that they're not sticking out, so you won't even really see them. And there you go. And then I just go back and make sure that my spiral still stayed the same, kind of readjust anything that needs it. And there is your little mushroom. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'm still starting out, so if you have any feedback, feel free to leave something in the comments. If you ended up making anything for my tutorial, please feel free to send me a message with a picture or anything, and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.